Hey guys, John here. Today we're in Avenger 2 and we're going to make some stuff kind of like this. Okay, so those are really fun to play, and it's also very easy to make. So we're going to be creating this kind of similar patch. It might be a little bit different, but anyway, let's go ahead and start this off. So initialize, let's go to yes. So we start off with the saw wave, which I always say so uninspiring, but yet it sounds so good. Okay, so let's go full voices of unison, bring our mix up, give us a little bit detune, and bring our octaves up to 3. So we have something kind of like that. It's basically, for the most part, what we need. Okay, so we can bring up a little bit of our release here. And then we need some reverb, obviously. Okay, and maybe a little bit of delays as well. Actually, a good amount of delays. Maybe more reverb. All right, and a little bit of noise. Might be kind of nice. Okay, so we have this here, and before we get into any of the crazy stuff, I do like to sculpt this just a little bit. So for the first one, I'm probably going to high pass this just a little bit. That way, if we want to add on to this later, we can add a bass, and the bass will have a nice clean spot to sit in. Okay, and then also we want to get that mud out of here. That stuff. It is disgusting. Okay, that's kind of cool. Maybe a little bit of a high shelf. Nothing crazy. I do like doing this just to bring up a little bit of that brightness. Bring the noise down just a bit here. It's always a careful balance between adding some noise and bringing up the top end, but you know. Okay, so that will probably do for the most part. Okay, so the next thing I like doing, you can go in here and you can add the transcade. That's one way to do it as well. You can also just use the step sequencer here if you'd like to. So the moment we turn this on, we have our transcade, which here is in our step sequencer, and it's basically doing this. Now that's cool, but sometimes it's kind of nice to break it up just a little bit by adding just maybe a half of a bar here. Or you can do a little bit down here as well. That's something you can do. Now, I do recommend, so this volume mix is very interesting because it's basically mixing in this whole step signature, so you'll see what I mean here. So this might be something that we would probably want to have on a macro, so if we brought this all the way down, maybe let's say, I don't know, let's use macro 3 for now because I have plans, and we'll go all the way to 100%, and we can rename this gate. That might be fine. And then once we turn this on, so we have a macro set up for a gate. This is pretty cool. Sounded pretty cool. So what else can we do with this? Maybe I do want to compress it a tiny bit. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So another thing that we might want to add is a little bit of drums. So really you can pick whatever you want. I use this this one down over here, this Mel Tech Kit 1. And let's turn our sequencer on. So we had have something like that. And we're using this clap here, so maybe we can add a little bit of reverb on that guy. Okay, that's kind of cool. So we got this guy, and what else do we want to add is another cool feature is the mini chain, which I really like using this effect in a lot of stuff anyway. So we go down here, we right click on our stack, and then we can go down here to mini chain, and we basically have the pumping vibe. It might be a little bit hard to notice once we have our gate on, so if we turn this down, we have that. So by default, this is going to be on a quarter note, and it's going to be on the first note. Now, if we're actually using a drum kit inside Avenger, what's really nice is on this sync here, let's change this to the bass drum. So every time the bass drum hits, or the kick drum hits, it's going to trigger this. Now this is playing 1/4, so essentially it's kind of doing the same thing. However, if you start changing this pattern up, that's going to follow, so just something to keep in the back of your mind. So that might be kind of cool. Now we have our gate off. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Now, this mini chain is something else I would also like to have on a macro, so that's why I'm going to use macro 2. So let's bring our mix all the way down, and let's drag and drop macro 2 onto this mix, and we'll give it 100%. And for this, we'll just put it as sidechain. So definitely kind of cool in that sense. So right now, we're actually just using one oscillator. Now, I believe in the last patch, I added another one. So this is going to be oscillator 2. And then also we want to route this to the same step sequencer and maybe bring this one up an octave. We can just scroll with our mouse wheel, give it full unison, full mix, and maybe detune this a little bit as well, because this is detuned as well. And we probably don't need to add the other octave. Definitely kind of cool depending on what kind of rhythmic elements you want, whether the sidechain or the gate or both or a mixture of the two. That's why it's kind of nice to have those on macros. Now, another thing I like to do to kind of move this around, let's bring our mini chain down a little bit, is if we right click here and maybe actually skip one because I might put a chorus there or something. But yeah, if we right click this here, we can kind of move the sound a little bit more if we want to via some rotary kind of things. So if we have this rotary sim, now I want to bring the drive all the way down because it's kind of a lot, and bring the mix down, especially on this default preset. So we have something kind of like that, and we can go through the different presets if you want to. Those are kind of interesting to add some texture to that, so let's play it and kind of see what that would sound like in the mix. It kind of makes it a little bit soft or something like that. So here I kind of like this at 36. So what I could do is bring this all the way down and grab a macro button, put this down here. And then, like I said, 36 is kind of maybe a cool amount. So once we turn this on, it's going to shoot up to 36, and we can call this rote or something like that. Because it does remove some of the high end, but also makes it kind of softer. So that might be something interesting we could introduce in the beginning of a song or something like that. And maybe for this guy, for the drums, I'll probably put that also on a macro as well. So if we're in our mixer and then we see our drums, we can bring this all the way down. Macro button 2, drag and drop this on the fader, and let's go to 50 right over here. And then we can turn this on and turn it off for no drums. depending on what we want to do. Let's label this drums so we know what we're doing. Drums, okay, cool. I wonder what it would sound like if Oscillator 2 is on an ARP. That might be interesting. Maybe not. I don't know. Quick idea. You never know. Okay, so we have that. Maybe a little bit of chorus could be kind of cool, but before we get into that, we haven't even touched our filter, and there's a lot of different ones to go through. So for this kind of sound, I do like using the Nexus Low Pass 12, so we can bring this down. And the cool part, generally, once we start doing some stuff, let's turn our drums off for now. Generally, if we hit some notes, we can move our envelope knob here, and that's cool if we're hitting different notes, but we want this to kind of trigger as the sequencer is, or the step sequencer is going. So what we can do is we can actually grab the step sequencer and drag and drop this on our filter and then give it some modulation amount there. So now these bars are going to control the depth of the filter modulation. And now we could probably put this macro or this filter on a macro. So kind of bring it down to where you think it should be the lowest. Maybe somewhere around there. And then we can drag and drop our macro to this guy and then all the way to 100%. So all the way open and then all the way closed. Now, one thing you can do as well is you can always leave a little bit of room for the modulation. That really depends on if you know how much of that modulation that you want. So as we can see this flickering here, it's kind of going around here. So maybe we can actually bring this down a little bit. So once it's all the way at the top, it still has some room to modulate via this step sequencer. So something to keep in the back of your mind as well. Yeah, so that's kind of just a fun patch to make there. Hopefully got your brain kind of moving around, see what other stuff you can do. So this is interesting. Maybe you can somehow incorporate an interesting type of ARP in there, but this sound already kind of fills out a lot of the spectrum. You could even cut out some of the low end, even more of the both of these oscillators, which are going to the equalizer here, and then maybe kind of sneak in a bass, or maybe make some kind of bass ARP that's doing like eighth notes or something like that. That might be kind of interesting too. But yeah, something to kind of think about, keep your brain moving, and happy patching. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next one.